just to share with other parents that aren't here today. So go ahead, Justin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tyler, and thanks for having me today. I'm really grateful to be here with all of you, in a virtual setting. And I'm really looking forward to a bit of a conversation after, but we figured I would start with a bit of a presentation. Before we start, I'd love for you to use the chat function and just drop one word about kind of how you're feeling today. Sorry. I see great, awesome, motivated, the sun. Sharon, I'm with you on the sun. Like I'm all here for the sun. Fantastic. Unsure, Suzanne, that's a fair answer. Thank you for that. Good, wonderful, out of happies. Good. I'm optimistic too. I think that's the perfect word. I appreciate you participating by sharing in the chat. I encourage you to use the chat, to your comfort level as we go. And then afterwards, I'm hopeful we can have an open conversation. I'm happy to answer any questions or share any information with you, as well. Tyler, thanks for the introduction. I work for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. If you are a Montreal Canadiens fan, it was really nice to see you today. You can now leave the call. The playoffs start on Thursday, and this is our year. I'll give you some insider. Like our marketing push this year for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs it's time, and it really just is. And when I think about the anti-oppressive work that you all are embarking on, the anti-racism work you're all embarking on, there's no better way to say it than that. It's time. I just want to give a bit of a trigger warning for those with lived experience, because some of what I will speak to today may recreate trauma. Anti-Black racism can affect Black people physically, mentally, emotionally. It causes trauma. It causes exhaustion. So many everyday interactions and experiences really lead to increased levels of anxiety, fear, anger, and oftentimes we have to code switch for survival. By way of land acknowledgement, we come together geographically dispersed, but brought together virtually. So I want us to take a moment to reflect on the meaning of traditional territory, land, and places. The land that I'm on today is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So my background, I'm a first-generation Canadian. I'm a proud Guyanese. If there are any Trinidadians on the call, please keep the banter in the chat to a minimum. I am a proud Scarborough native. I've gone all around this world, but I've never lived anywhere but Scarborough. I hope to get back to coaching basketball at some point if COVID ever decides to end. But in addition to my day job and my coaching, I'm the board member for Canada's National Ballet School. I'm also on the board of directors for the Coaches Association of Ontario. I'm a member of the Canadian Paralympic Community's Ontario Parasport Collective, which is really focused on trying to create better pathways and access for opportunities for youth facing barriers. So I never say marginalize youth. I never say at risk. To me, I try to center the experience of the young person and then talk about the barriers that they are facing. Because to me, it's the systems that are broken. And I find that in society, we keep asking people to make the change when really my belief is it's the system that's got to shift. So hopefully you can see the screen share. Thumbs up if you can see it. It's good. Perfect. So it's interesting because, I'm working in this role in equity, diversity, inclusion. I've been doing equity work through sport my entire career. And over this last year with these two pandemics, it's been interesting. So a lot of people were asking me in February to come in and speak on Black History Month. And I really was reflecting on it. And I was like, I actually really don't like Black History Month. Can't stand it. And I really try to unpack it for myself. And it took me some time, but I think I kind of understand now why. Sports saved my life. I was not a good student. I really didn't like school. But to play on the sports teams, I had to keep my GPA at a certain level. I really believe if I didn't stay engaged in sport, I would have never graduated from university. I failed my first class ever in my first semester. It was Stats 1. I'll never forget it. I'm sitting in an auditorium with 400 students, and Professor Claire Chua said, look to your left, look to your right. One of these two people is going to fail this class. And I didn't realize they were both looking at me. It was the first time I failed something. It was the first time I didn't make a team. It was the first time something that I wanted, I couldn't just get. But the best thing happened because I was on the men's basketball team at Ryerson. My coach said, look, you're on academic probation. You're going to go see a learning strategist. I'm like, a learning strategist? I grew up in the hood. I don't know what that is. So I went and met with this lady and she said, okay, I want to sit with you and I want to unpack the way that you learn. And I said, oh, okay, cool. So we started to talk. And she said, it seems like you're a kinesthetic and you're an auditory learner. What do you do in class? I'm like, I don't know. I do what all the other kids do. I just sit there and write all these notes. And when I leave class, I look at the notes and I don't even know what I wrote, even though it's my writing. She goes, okay, I want you to try this. I want you to go to class and I want you to not write anything. I just want you to listen. And when class is finished, I want you to write down as much as you can remember. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So here I am now, super cool jock. Got my tracksuit on walking into class with no book bag, one of the few black kids, obviously. And everyone's looking at me like, this guy's not serious. And I'm actually looking at myself like, yeah, this guy's not serious. So I sit and I listen to the lecture. And afterwards, I feverishly write down everything I can remember. And my life changed. I finally learned how to learn. And if I wasn't on that basketball team, I would have never experienced that. At this point, I should have a PhD in basketball. Look, the amount of hours I've spent coaching and watching film and scouting and recruiting and practice planning. Like if I was working on quantum physics, they would recognize it. But for some reason, the thing that means so much to me is just not important to them. I should have a PhD in basketball. My dissertation on screening roles and strong side defense would be riveting, I'm telling you. And my favorite quote is in life, as in basketball, because everything that I've learned on the court are things that I've brought into my professional, my personal life. And I think sometimes we really diminish the extracurriculars that make us who we are without realizing what they really are doing for our futures. Why I don't like Black History Month? Well, the first thing is the word history. Oxford says it's the study of past events, particularly in human affairs, and you see a subnote there on medieval European history. They talk about the history of Aegean painting, but I know painting didn't start on the shore of Greece, it started in Africa. So even when you tell me what history means, you're telling me history is European and Eurocentric, and I'm telling you that's just not fact-based evidence. So when you talk about Black history, are you talking about my history or yours? Dr. Christopher Taylor of the University of Waterloo said this to me, and it's really changed my life. We need to shift the conversation from Blackness to whiteness. We need to stop talking about what Black people in society need to do and start talking about the systems of oppression that are being upheld by white supremacy. He also said to me, Justin, you don't have to be white to uphold white supremacy. And I had to let that sink in. I'll say it again. You don't have to be white to uphold white supremacy. I have to own my space as a Black man, that there are things that I've participated in or I've done or not done or said or haven't said that have negatively affected my community. But if we keep telling Black kids, you know what, you got to work twice as hard to make it. Just do more. Okay, John, they called you the N-word on the ice. Just go out there and score a goal. You'll show them. If we're okay to accept that Black people have to work twice as hard, are we okay to accept that white people have to work half as hard to get the same thing? That's a tough part of this work. Abraham Lincoln, Honest Abe, the man who freed the slaves. But in the great debates, Abe also said a lot of things that really made it hard to reconcile. Specifically, he said, I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and Black races. There must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. Honest Abe. So this got me thinking, man, like, Abe, did you free the slaves because you think that I deserved it, or did you need it? Who benefited from you freeing the slaves from the South? Because in your impending civil war, did you learn that the strength of the African man and woman would really help you persevere against the South? Did you figure out that these people who know the back streets, canals, alleys, and riverways of the deep South can help you forge a war? Who's benefiting from this activity? So when I sit through class and you tell me Honest Abe Lincoln freed the slaves because he was a good guy, I really have to start to question that history. Who's benefiting is the question I'd like to ask. Edward Bulwer Lytton said, the pen is mightier than the sword, and I'm telling you, he is so right. Because when you hold the pen and you write policy and you write procedure and you write law, you tell us what's right and what's wrong. When you hold the pen and you free the slaves when it's convenient for you, you don't need to pick up that sword anymore. You'll just sign my pink slip and I'll be free to go. When you think about the history of policing, when you think about the history of education, when you think about the history of the industry that you all wake up every single morning to give to young people more than most of us in society even think about doing, you have to unpack the pen being mightier than the sword. So let's take a look at this now. Post 9/11, we started seeing symbols, sayings, words, messages all the time about what terrorism looks like. If you see something, say something. Report suspicious behavior. So any bus stop, any airport, even on this subway car, you would see signage keeping you aware, hyper aware. And we now know, 20 years later, the impact that's had against anti-Islamophobia, around hate, around discrimination. But we started to build storylines in our mind. Like if I was walking through Pearson Airport and I saw, a middle-aged, maybe military-aged man who has a long beard, who's probably dressed a little different than me, whose language is really loud and aggressive, I might look twice at this guy. If I saw a package or a bag left alone on a TTC station, I might call and report it. We started to convince ourselves what terrorism looked like. Now, I'm not here to say whether it's right or wrong. We all know there's been good and bad that's come from this. But what I'm saying is, if I was sitting on this same crowded TTC car in the middle of rush hour and it was packed like a tin of sardines, and no one would sit in the empty seat beside me, would you report that as racism? But that's a subway car. What does racism look like and sound like and feel like in the thing that I love so much, which is sport? This is Marcus Rashford. I won't repeat what the fans are yelling at Marcus, but none of it's pleasant. The interesting thing about this is that this is a home match. He's not on the road. These are his fans. Now, the ones that are not yelling are smiling and watching. To endure racism in your own home pitch, playing for a club that you're representing, is really interesting for me. But this is what I love about Black people. Because regardless of what they say to Marcus, this is Marcus's reaction. I don't have to explain much about the gentleman on the right, Colin Kaepernick, but I'll talk about Keandre Miller on the left. Because this is the thing I hear more than anything in hockey. I sit on the NHL's Youth Hockey Inclusion Council, and we're trying to learn how to diversify and grow the sport. And the first question they asked me was, Justin, what do you think hockey's going to look like in 10 years? And I'm like, it's going to look like a Blockbuster video location because you're getting Netflix. And you think kids are leaving hockey for soccer and basketball and football, but they're not. They're leaving for TikTok and Instagram, and they don't care as much as they used to. And they say, well, we just want to play hockey. Like all this Black Lives Matter stuff and this anti-Asian hate and this LGBTQ2S plus stuff, like, I don't know. We just want to play hockey. Like, let's just keep politics out of sport. And I say, it's interesting you say that. The New York Rangers, they weren't that good this year. But they have a top 6 defenseman named Tony Van. And all summer, Tony is tweeting a lot of messages in support of the former United States president. A lot of what he's saying, in my opinion, is borderline racist, borderline hate speech. But, he can say what he wants. This kid on the left, Keandre Miller, is a young black hockey player coming through the Rangers system. And they're like, you know what? We're not really that good this year. Let's throw the kid in the fire. Let's just put him out there. Let's see what he can do. He starts to perform pretty well. He starts to progress. He makes it all the way up to the NHL club. Now, Keandre's entire summer was Black Lives Matter protests, was tweeting, was talking to friends. And now you're going to ask these two men to get in a locker room together and play hockey when their beliefs, their ideological understanding of the world is so far apart. Now, I'm not saying everyone's got to agree on it, but the lack of ability to have cultural discourse and disagree with another human without it turning into an argument is where we're going wrong. So I ask hockey people, how are you going to win a Stanley Cup if Tony DeAngelo and Keandre Miller have to play on the same line in the same locker room and they hate each other before they've even met? At what point are we going to understand that this is not about politics or sport? This is about humanity. This is about us as human beings. Now, if I walk into a bar, let's just say I'm in like Little Burgundy, you know, enemy territory, and I've got my Leafs jersey on, and I walk into this Habs bar, and everyone's got their Habs gear on. People are going to look at me and be like, whoa, hold on a second. If we sat down as fans of opposing teams wearing just a plain t-shirt and started to really connect, have a beer, really enjoy each other's company, and then find out 30 minutes into the chat that we like opposite teams, we can work through that. But if I walk in that bar with my Leafs gear on right from the start, you probably wouldn't even speak to me. Here's the thing about my blackness. I can't take it off when I enter a room. But that's America. That was the UK. We live in Canada. There's no racism in Canada. Well, Donovan Bailey disagrees. He says in Canada, it's racism with a smile. And what better smile than this? This is Soria Tinker. She plays on the women's national team. She also plays in a league in the US. And she took on an entire media organization because she felt that they were being extremely racist in a lot of the comments that they were making. And all of her teammates, all of the people in the league were extremely supportive until that happened. Soon as that happened, it was like, oh, hold on, Soria, I don't know if we can talk about that. And here she is, a black girl playing hockey with the intersectionality that she carries, struggling to find her own voice, and all of her white peers backed away. It's getting too close to home now. It's really easy for us to speak on and condemn racism in other parts of the world because it doesn't affect us. The hard work and the equity work is taking on the challenges that directly affect the way that I have to behave every single day. But that's sports. Let's talk about education. What does racism look like, sound like, feel like there? Well, this is a wonderful example out of Utah, where parents on the parent council, decided that they didn't want their kids to have to learn about Black history. So they were going to keep their kids home for the whole month of February because they didn't think their kids should have to learn about that. Now, Donovan Mitchell is the point guard for the Utah Jazz in the NBA, and he commented and said that he thought it was inappropriate that white parents would have their kids, quote unquote, opt out of Black History Month. But Donovan, I actually kind of disagree with you, bro. I think we should all choose what we want to do because I would have skipped math and science and English and trade. Why don't we just do this thing where we can all just pick what we think is important? Why don't we just let kids pick everything? Why do we have rules at all? But the pen is mightier than the sword. If you get to rewrite the story, you get to control the narrative. So the question I ask again is who's benefiting? What about unemployment? Well, I'm working with a sports organization and they're like, Justin, we need to diversify. We need more, we need more diversity in our staff. And I said, well, your team looks pretty diverse to me. I don't look like you got eclectic. This is like bag of Skittles. This is nice. I like the way y'all look. No, but we're just not, we need more diversity. I said, well, why don't you say what you want to say? There's no Black people that work here. Because the erasure of Blackness happens when you use the term BIPOC. When you mesh my experience with the experience of somebody else, The erasure of blackness happens first. And I'll tell you who's the number one loser every time. It's the Black woman. Every single time. So now that we've unpacked that, like, let's be specific. We need to find Black females to work here. Perfect. Thank you for saying that. Let's extend that and say Black women and gender minorities. Let's just open it up. Let's do big I inclusion. Okay, Justin, this is great. Where do we start? Like, where do we find some applicants? I said, you want to find some Black applicants to work in sport? No problem. Here's where we'll start. I want you to start in grade 6. And he said, what? Grade 6? Like, what do you mean? Like, we have a hiring cycle. We're ready to go now. Like, where's the candidates? And I said, well, there's this wonderful thing in our province called streaming. And I know that the government's removed it. It's going to take about a decade to see the benefits of that. But if you're in grade 7 and 8 and you're being asked to choose your courses for grade 9, and you're told by your teacher or guidance counselor that you're an auditory learner like Justin, if you're told that you're better at listening, so you're more hands-on, you should go into applied courses. Well, of course I know from Africa. You didn't give us pens. You didn't give us paper. So we told stories. That's how we taught ourselves. Now you're going to hold that against me generations later, after you brought me here to work the way that you think I should work. And now you're going to put me in an applied stream, which means that I'm not going to go to university, which means that I can't go to Brock, which means that I can't take sport management, which means that I can't become an intern at your stupid sports company. So the development, the training, the experience, the mentorship, all those goal-setting opportunities, the skills I didn't get to get this stupid internship, I'll never get. So if you want to hire me, you want to find the next Justin, go to grade 6. The system is not working. So I don't like Black History Month unless we use Black history to highlight Black excellence and we shift our focus to Black futures. Black futures I can talk about. Like these ones. Like the young people that I'm privileged to work with every single day. That come from neighborhoods where people wouldn't dare set foot. That wake up every morning with the weight of the world on their shoulder, but they give back to others. Now, I'm a bit naive, and I really do think sport can change the world. But we are using sport as a tool to help young people recognize and reach their potential. It's called sport for development. If we're going to talk about Black futures, now I can show up. And I really genuinely believe that we have to invest in Black youth because sports saved my life. I should have a PhD in basketball. And in life, as in basketball, the decisions that we make today are going to impact our youth for tomorrow. Thanks for your time.
Can we open up to some questions?
I'm open to questions, comments, and emotional outbursts, whatever makes you feel good. And you're welcome to use the chat function if that's more comfortable for you. And thank you for listening. Tanya, go ahead. Thanks for raising your hand. That's so formal. That's so nice. Where I work, we just start yelling and people are just talking over each other. Or was that a high five? That was a high five? There's your high five back. Aaron, is that a high five? Is your hand?
No, I have a question.
Thank you.
I would love to give you a high five though. I was just curious, what led you into MLSE in the first place? Like what kind of led you into that direction?
That's a great question. Sport's been it for me, honestly. I worked for Toronto Community Housing for 6 years. It's the largest social housing provider in Canada, second largest in North America behind New York's NYCHA. I was really focused on community economic development, trying to break the generational cycle of social housing and poverty through sport, and bringing in employment programs, trying to hire kids to coach sports, trying to keep kids engaged. For anyone who's from the GTA and remember the summer of the gun, a lot of funding came after that, and I tried to take as much of that funding as I could and use it for sport. After that, I got a really cool opportunity to go work for a small not-for-profit. It's called Fit Spirit. It's based out of Quebec. They were scaling their business into Ontario, and it was all women, all white women, all francophone, all in Quebec, and they hired me. So they took a huge chance. I took a chance too, and we did a lot to try to diversify. Like in sport, in the last 10 years, diversity has been whitewood. That's it. There's been no intersectional approach at all. So we're making really good inroads, and now that people are starting to understand a little bit more of the depths of the needs of cultural diversity, I was able to kind of influx some of that. And then like my dream job came available, and I was working for the MLSE Foundation in a project called the Launchpad. And I was, running all of our sport programs, and it was really the perfect cross section between sport and community development, and the things that I care about the most. So that was kind of my path into that. In the last 3 months, I've left the charity and joined the dark side of the corporation to lead this ED&I portfolio. But I'm really looking to bring the same energy of the community, of the work that you all do in working directly with young people who need our support, and using the power of our brands to support that work. But thanks so much for your question.
Thank you.
Is it Sel? Seal? Sel?
Sal, yeah, you had it.
Sel.
I just want to say thank you. This was a really great presentation, and I really appreciated the fact that you brought in the Abraham Lincoln quote and actually showed what he meant by everything he was doing. I don't know, it was just, I've never heard that quote before, so that was a really hot take. So I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to ask, what has been the hardest part about trying to spread this kind of a message to people, especially to white folks? There's a lot of white fans, especially within the hockey community.
Yeah.
So what do you find has been the most difficult thing trying to take this on?
How long do you have, Sel?
I got all day.
Thanks so much for your comment, and also for the question. So ED&I is not sexy, and people don't want to be connected to ED&I. So I'll tell you, the first thing I'm doing is I'm branding all of our work as social impact and growth. We need to do really, really great things, and we need to grow our fan base and grow our revenue. I work for a for-profit business. Let's be real, right? We're gonna make money. So that's the first thing I'll say is that. The second thing is I'm trying to remove the hyper focus on race because it's uncomfortable. It's been the attack of the white man for the last decade. Me Too, LGBTQ, anti-Asian, anti-Black, anti-Indigenous. This isn't about the white man being bad. This is about all of us figuring out where we fit in this puzzle. The systems are the things I focus on, right? So this is not an attack on any white person. This is an attack on the system, which I'm still part of too, right? So Black people are not a monolith. I can't speak for every Black person in the world, but I also try to remind people that white people are a monolith either. Your skin can be white from Ireland, from Jamaica, from South Africa, from England. We got to get away from this color of people's skin. And that's why I give the analogy of wearing my jersey into the bar. This jersey isn't everything I am. And if you give me a chance to get to know each other, we're going to find some commonality. We're going to find something we can build off of. So, Sel, to answer your question, the most challenging thing is the fear, angst that everyone has about talking about race, because we've lost the ability to have discourse, right? So I'm trying to remove that and say, this is not me blaming or condemning you. This is us together saying we're leaders. We got to step up together. We got to break these systems that are not working. And these 2 pandemics over the last year have really shown us that. All of these systems are crumbling. I work in rinky-dink sport. You guys work in serious work. You're changing kids' lives every single day. I work in sport. Our system's not even working. So when you look at return to play post-COVID, and the young people that are disproportionately affected by COVID are also disproportionately affected by access to sport. So for me, Sal, I try to bring that in together. I try to make sure people understand the growth opportunity that we have. This is not a big, scary, daunting task. This is our ability to have a greater impact. And then let's just be honest, right? There are more Canadians over the age of 65 than under the age of 60 right now. But that demographic of 16 to 24 is racialized. It's racialized. So I'm not saying let's kick out the whole lower bowl of the Leafs game. Bring your money, we need that. But 10 years from now, that lower bowl is going to have to look different, and we're going to be out of business. So I think there's a business perspective of this too, where it's trying to remove the personal feelings and my lived identity as a Black person and say, it's not even about me. If you want this business to thrive, imagine we don't promote to Asian people. Why is it so awkward to talk about anti-Asian hate? We just don't talk to them. Do you know how much money we're leaving on the table? You know how much money we're leaving on the table not talking to Black and Indigenous people? You know how much money we're not getting by talking to people with a physical or cognitive disability? We just got to think differently about how we do this. So I think the biggest challenge is how apprehensive and cautious and afraid people are to have these conversations.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for your question.
There's a question in the chat there, Justin, from Sharon Hall.
For white foster parents, how can we bring Black role models into our foster children's lives? I think that's a great question. I think, you know, as I mentioned, I sit on the board for the National Ballet School of Canada. And one of the things we're trying to do is change ballet culture, right? Like, it's Eurocentric, it's extremely traditional, it's way too expensive. We have to change our approach on this. So I'll tell you this funny story. So one of the things we literally talk about is like, if a Black kid walks into a ballet studio with a bonnet or a circle wrap or a do-rag on their head, how do you think that would go? Like, how do you think your dance instructor would view this young person, boy, girl, gender minority, walking in with something covering their hair? Like, well, it's not part of the aesthetic, it's not part of the uniform. I'm like, is there some physical disposition about the bone density of Africans that makes them more or less apt to do ballet? Like, I don't know, I'm just asking because I don't know a lot about ballet. They're like, no, it's all aesthetic. I'm like, oh, so it's what you think looks good. I get it. So here's the thing, you see this little Black girl whose hair's tied down for ballet practice? That's because it takes like an entire bottle of shampoo and conditioner for her to treat her hair. So she circle wrapped it last night and she tied it down. So when she's practicing today, it wouldn't come out of place. So that tomorrow at that show, where all those people are spending the money, her hair's gonna look nice and it's gonna sit pretty. So you make a choice. Do you want her to wear this thing on her head today, or do you want her to have her hair messy tomorrow? So to answer your question, I think cultural understanding, cultural competency is the biggest room for growth for all of us. So sourcing out the role model and leader, I think, comes back down to that individual youth journey and experience. Like, am I a person they want to listen to? Maybe. Are they into sport? If they're into anime, I can't help them. I don't know anything about that. So I think it's getting back down to the level of, what are the cultural aspects that maybe I'm not well in tune with that I can connect you to someone else who is, right? And then I think you've got a resource, you've got a network of colleagues, you've got Black colleagues, you've got people in other organizations that it's now your challenge as a white leader to expand your network. It's your challenge now to go and find who those role models might be for those individual youth, depending on what their personal needs are, what their interests are. And I think this is where we have to challenge ourselves, right? If I ask you to write down on a piece of paper the 10 people you trust the most, okay, go ahead, do it in your head. The 10 people you trust the most. It's harder, right? And then if I asked you to look at that piece of paper with those 10 people you trust the most and tell me how many of them share the same sex, how many of them share the same gender identity, how many of them have a similar skin shade, how many of them are similar age, from the same type of part of the world that you're from. Like, we all have these biases. Like, my group chat is on fire, bunch of Black guys. Those are the people I talk to the most. So the people I trust the most all look like me, think the same things I think. The more we can expand that and meet and learn from new people, I think it will enable us to understand what kind of mentors could be out there for you. So I hope that answers it. I don't know if you're looking for, specifically like who mentors would be, but I genuinely think that, again, as we're not a monolith, figuring out what that young person's needs are and where their identity intersects with some mentors that could be out there. As an agency, could I personally, is it Niluka?
Oh yeah, no, I was just making a comment, like, as an agency, maybe try to recruit those of color, those of indigenous descent, so that the children can connect. Sorry for the background.
Why would you say sorry? That's the best part of the call. People are always like, oh, I'm sorry, my kids make it out.
Also, I just wanted to make a comment. As a woman of color, being married to a Black man, I just thought what you shared today was beyond incredible, and it would be so awesome to see other agencies, have a talk such as this, because I think it was absolutely incredible. And just a thanks to Carpe Diem for doing this. I thought it was incredible to have you on. I learned so much, and your perspective was phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate that. What word of encouragement do you have for such students? It's hard. School's hard. I'm probably not, back to my last point, I'm probably not the person you want to bring to talk about school, because I really don't like it. I'm not a huge, I work in a college, I graduated from university, I graduated from college, and I'm like not a huge believer in post-secondary education. I will say this. I learned so much about myself going through school. As a hiring manager, I don't care what you graduated in, I just want to know you finished because I know how hard it was for me. So I try to focus less on, like when I'm giving advice to young people about school, I try to focus less on like, you'll have a degree in this. So, after I get through stats 1, I realized that I've got like a huge phobia with numbers. So I have stats, I have economics, I have finance, I have marketing. I'm like, bro, I can't do this. I gotta do something else. So I come home, I have a tough conversation with my parents. I'm like, I gotta leave business. I want to take something else. And my mom's like, well, what are you gonna take? And I'm like, I think I want to take sociology. And she's like, well, what are you gonna do with the sociology? I'm like, I don't know. But tell me what I'm gonna do with half a business degree because I'm not gonna take it. This ain't for me. This is me having 2 parents who care, who love me, and but like they were just going back, they don't know the school system here. They couldn't help me navigate course selection and figuring out what to take. So what do? We go pick the thing either those 10 people we trust are taking, or we really focus on what the thing sounds like. So the advice I usually give is go look at the actual course syllabus. Go look at the actual courses you're gonna have to take. Look at where you're gonna spend all those hours and figure out if this stuff is interesting to you. It would have sounded really cool to have a Bachelor of Business Administration, but I didn't want to sit through all those classes. So that's one thing I'd say. The second thing in terms of words of encouragement is you really don't know who you are till you try. And my basketball coach used to always say to me, you have to know who you are and you have to know where you are. So if you catch that ball outside the 3-point line and you're not a good shooter, you better pass it or drive it, or you better find something else to do. And in life as in basketball, like you got to know who you are and where you are. So if you know you're not a good student, you have to go into it knowing that and putting that time in, putting in the effort to make yourself as good of a student as you can be. And the piece of encouragement that I give is that it took me 8 years to finish my undergrad. 8 years. People always say, oh, you run the basketball team at Ryerson, so you must have graduated. I'll stop you right there. It took me 8 years. And I tell people this. A lot of people are like, oh, wow, like you tell people that? Yeah, of course, I finished. I'm proud that I finished. There were so many moments I didn't think I would. I had to leave school. I had to work full time. I had to work part time in addition to that. I took all my courses part time. It took me 8 years to finish my undergrad, and I'm proud to tell people that. So I think it's like also that relatability for young people and understanding that there are barriers for Black students. Acknowledging that is huge. You have to acknowledge it. But the words of encouragement is like, you can get it done. I got it done, Thanks for that in the chat. Oh, scholarships, yes. The Black North Initiative, I'm part of the Black North Initiative, which is a really cool organization that's founded by Wes Hall. We're trying to connect corporate Canada to the Black community. Like just really sit in the middle of that and make those connections. So if you want to follow with me after, Tyler can share my email with the group, and I'm happy to share some scholarship resources for young people. Thank you for the comments. My views on police. Yeah, for sure. 100%. I think I'll give you a couple stories. So I'm in my first week at MLSE, and I'm in my car with my boss and another coworker, 2 white women, and we're leaving our facility, and we're going to Regent Park. So I grew up at, anyone from the city, I grew up at River and Gerard, Regent Park. I moved to Scarborough after that, and then, I've been in Scarborough my whole life. And I'm at Dundas and Jarvis, if you're from the city, you'll know what I'm saying. And we're coming out of the building, and there's a no left turn sign at Dundas. So I make 3 rights, circle the block, and go back around to go to Regent Park. And she leans over and she goes, why didn't you turn left there? And I'm like, well, there's a no left turn sign. And she goes, everyone turns left here. I'm like, this is my first week in the job. They're really explaining to this white woman why she could turn left here and I can't. So I just said, Justin, just leave it. I didn't tell her this story until after George Floyd was murdered. I said, I want to tell you something that I never forgot, but I never brought it up, and I'm going to tell you this story now. I used to work in Toronto community housing. I had semi-legal tints on my car. And I would be in and out of every priority community in the city, and I would get stopped every single day. Every single day. I work for Toronto community housing. A lot of the same neighborhood police will be working the same beat every single day. They'll get stopped. what's my perspective on police? I have a son, his name is Sebastian. He turned 5 on Friday. It's his second quarantine birthday. My daughter, Annabelle, is 2, so her whole life has been a quarantine. I don't think she knows anything else. And thank you, Stella. And we're watching the George Floyd protests a year ago, and it's on CNN, like everybody else was, right? Like locked in on the channel. I mean, I don't know what channel you were watching, right? I was watching CNN. We're locked in, and my son goes, "Daddy, why are all the people at the parade?" And I said, "What parade?" That's what he's talking about. And he said, "Well, look at all the people. They're at a parade." So I'm like, "Oh wow, okay." So Sebastian came with me to the Raptors championship parade, and that's his frame of reference for why there would be all these people in the street. Like, why else would there be all these people on the road? And I was like, "Oh no, this is not a parade. It's a protest." "What's a protest?" I'm like, "Here we go." Okay, cool. Okay, well, the people are not happy, and the people are not listening to them, so they're going to protest so they can talk loudly, so the people will listen to them. And he goes, "Oh, so they're mad at the police." And I was like, "Holy smokes, okay." I'm like, "Well, yeah, they're mad at the police because something bad happened with the police, and the police are not listening to them." He goes, "So are police bad?" So I'll pause there. We're putting together something at work for youth post George Floyd, and you know, our communications team, PR people are all risk averse, right? So I'm not holding this against them personally. That's their job. Their job is to like not get in trouble. They said, "Well, don't you think we should soften this language because it's for youth, it's for kids? Like it seems a bit harsh, aggressive." I said, "When you're talking to Black youth, you can't soften the language. I have to tell them the truth. Like you might get to tell your kids whatever you want, but I don't have that luxury. I have to tell them the whole story." So back to this story with Sebastian. And I said, "Bass, there are no good police. There are no bad police. There are just humans. So just because someone is a police officer doesn't mean they're good, and it doesn't mean they're bad. And just like with everybody else in this society, you have to meet them, and you have to get to know who they are, and then you decide if they're nice, and then you decide if they're not." But I critically am having a conversation about policing and race with a 4-year-old. And I don't get to say, the police are the good guys. They come and they save. I don't get to say that. That's not been my experience. So when people say things like defund the police, abolish the police, I really understand where it comes from, because police were instituted to catch slaves. That's how the police force started. So a lot of Black people are afraid of dogs. And people are always like, "Why are Black people always so afraid of dogs?" And I really started to think about it. But if you really critically analyze it and you go back to my ancestors, and dogs were used to capture or kill me, that fear, that trauma is generational. So if you don't know about the term generational trauma, please look into it. The trauma that my ancestors faced is being passed down to me, and I don't even know why I'm afraid of this dog. I never even seen a dog before. It's just in me. The projection as a parent, what I put onto my child. When my kid's leaving the front door and they're running to the car, and I say, "Stop, don't go close to the road," I'm instilling fear in my child. We all do this with unconscious bias. So when I think about the history of policing, when I think about the ability of the RCMP to go and collect Indigenous youth and return them, I have to really critically unpack this. The number one question I ask in equity work is, who's benefiting? Who's benefiting? So my personal feeling with police is there's no good police, there's no bad police. I have tons of homies who are cops, and we talk about this all the time. I couldn't tell you how many police officers I talk to, the highest levels. And my goal now is to figure out, how do we get everyone to the table? How do we reform the way we think about community policing? How do we think about unconscious bias with interactions? How do we think about kids in care that you're all working with? How do we think about over-policing communities and having a lack of trust-based policing? And this is where people sometimes say, "Well, what about the Black community?" And I say, we got our part to play too. But again, don't make it about the human, it's about the system. The system of policing is not working. That's not me being critical of individual officers. That's me saying the system is broken. So that's my feeling on that.
Justin, why do you think it's so hard for white people to talk about racism?
That's a great question, Tyler. Thank you. my personal opinion is guilt. It's that there's a feeling that you're being judged for something that you literally didn't do. You didn't do this. So I think that's why we have to start to educate ourselves on being non-racist versus anti-racist. So, hey, I never used the N-word. I'm not racist, non-racist. I am amplifying anti-racist speech. I am amplifying Black communities and brown communities and racialized people. Like, there's a huge difference in that. There's a difference between sponsorship and mentorship. There's an unconscious bias that comes in when you start to build an idea of what this Leafs fan looks like before you interact with them. And that's not your fault. Just like it's not my fault. But here's the thing we have to talk about, Tyler. There are individual acts of hate and racism, and then there is systemic oppression. And that's why I go back to saying, in my opinion, what we really need to focus on is the system. Because then the individual people are all going to get called out. It's going to be very hard to hide if the system is reformed. Institutional structures, it's going to be really hard to be that individual person who believes in individual acts of hate. And I think that's where we have to make this connection, this change. Like, everybody can be discriminatory. I am discriminatory. I have bias, but I'm not in control of the systems. We don't hold power in society to restrict or block access to other people. So when you look at it across the board, white people will say to me like, yeah, but like, I don't understand. Like, I didn't do this. So I'm like, I'm not saying you did this, but you benefited from it. Just like I did. Because yeah, I'm Black, but I also, I'm university educated. I also can use vernacular that makes white people feel very comfortable. So I'm a safer Black hire than a lot of my Black friends. And I have to own that too. I have to own that. So it's really, in my opinion, Tyler, like, this lack of comfort comes from guilt. Comes from like, well, what if I get called out? Like, what if I did something wrong? And I think that's where we got to get over that hump about it's not about you, it's about the system that we have to reform together.
Thanks, Justin. There's another question there in the chat, which is.
I'll go to Amani and then I'll come back to the chat.
Hey, thank you so much. First of all, I'm actually a really new foster mom, and I have an experience that I wanted to share. So last year in the summer, I was taking care of a young child. He was 3 years old, and he was an Indigenous child. So he had very long hair, first of all. So his hair they were not allowed to cut his hair until his grandparents approved. So he had very long hair, and a lot of, I would take him out and a lot of people would assume that he was a female. So first, I feel like there's a lot of these, I think sharing knowledge is really important. So people understanding that, because he has long hair doesn't mean he's necessarily a girl, so we would take him to the park and a lot of children would go and start playing with him. And I noticed how his behavior was just very different from other children, because he just played a little bit more aggressively, or he would do stunts in the parks that would scare a lot of the other children. So he kind of cleared out multiple times, would clear out an entire playground just by his presence there. So, this was very eye-opening for me. And I realized, I wanted him to sort of be involved in a karate class with my son. And I realized that his underprivilege runs so deep that he would not even have that opportunity, like that opportunity of, that are things that are available to regular, other children like my son are not available to him, or I would have to basically work with him to have him even integrate into, a karate class or an art class or something, right? So I think one of the things that we as foster parents or just everyone else as a community need to do is understand that some of these kids that come from these underprivileged communities need extra help integrating into, a classroom that they're not usually have not been a part of, right? So that, for me, that experience as a whole was really, it was just very eye-opening. Like, I didn't understand how that underprivileged affects these children on a day-to-day basis. So I think, this is something I never would have understood had it not been for that experience. So
thank you for sharing that. I think so much of what you said is so powerful. My son's hair is super long too. He has long braids, gets misgendered all the time.
Right.
I don't care. He's critically aware of it, so I definitely understand what you're saying with that. I loved how you acknowledged your learning in that, because I think that's the biggest piece. And maybe the social structure and the Eurocentric activities don't fit for him, and your son can participate with your other son in something that's more culturally relevant on that side. And maybe that's how you level the playing field a little bit and give him some access to his own culture so that he can start to feel and reconcile what that might mean. Kids, as you all know, you all work with kids, have so many identities and they're shifting, like they're transitionary. So what's cool, what's hot now won't be hot in 6 months anyway. And I think, it's not so much about the karate, but it's about your recognition that the kid's going to be treated differently and he's beginning to perceive it. So how can you start to kind of normalize that culture?
Right.
I have a really close friend who leads a lot of disability sport work in Ontario, and I'm learning so much from him over the last 5 or 6 years. And he's been talking to me about like universal design and like wheelchair accessible ramps. And I'm like, all right, cool, bro. Like I get it. Wheelchair ramps are great. Like it's obviously important for sure. And then I have a kid, and I'm pushing a stroller into no frills, and I'm like, hold on, there's no ramp. This is crazy. I have to go around. And then I get to the door and I push the button and the accessible button doesn't work. So I get it now and I start telling this stop kid, I'm like, hey, your accessible button doesn't work. And like I turn into a Karen. I didn't even know how it happened. And then he's like, well, why do you need the button? You can walk. I'm like, it's not about me, man. It's about the next person. Fix the button. And now I'm like, I'm an activist. This is weird. So I go in and get my stuff. I leave. And I realize now that like, as much as I needed the ramp that day, it was still a choice. I didn't have to bring a stroller. I don't always bring my kid. I could lift a stroller if I need to. If I needed that ramp because I had a physical mobility issue, what would I do? And it was that experience, similarly to the experience that you had, was until I could get into the moment and understand it, I struggled to conceptualize it. And back to your point, Tyler, I think that's another barrier for white people, is that you're not racialized. So you're not going to understand what it feels like, but the closer proximity we can get to drawing those parallels and finding those similarities is, I think, how we get that cultural understanding of how to support the young people that are in our care.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. The question, did I lose it? Oh, Marlene, right. Quite often I'm mentioning the system is broken. It's broken, Marlene. What are my recommendations? That's a great question. I think the first thing is establishing like a really clear vision for what success looks like. Like we might all think success is a different thing. So I think getting on the same page is really important. Amani's point also made me think about equality versus equity. Like everyone getting the same thing is not going to lead to a positive outcome for everyone. So I'll give you an example. I'm playing on the varsity basketball team. I'm like 6'1", 175 pounds. I haven't been that big for quite some time. It's COVID thing there. And I got a teammate who's literally 7 foot, 240. We get the exact same meal per week. This man is like twice my size. So we all had an equal meal, but homeboy needs more food. And I think having an equitable approach is going to really help us to understand what success looks like. So if we say, look, we want every kid to end up in this point, that doesn't mean that every kid is going to have the same journey. So what are the things that each kid needs to get to that thing? That's when the system will be flourishing. Right now, the system is like, everybody gets the same thing and some will make it, some won't. Sorry, we did our best and that's it. And if we can reformat what success looks like, I think that will help us. I think the next thing is trying to map and like map the landscape and identify like key drivers of success. So we know what success is. How are we going to get there? So I'm sorry, all my analogies are sports analogies. So if you don't like sport, you can have a refund, no problem. So Austin Matthews plays in the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. And 2 summers ago, he did an interview going into the offseason. And they said, Austin, what are you going to work on this summer? And he goes, well, you know what? I really like to score goals. But I realized I can't score goals unless I have the puck. So I'm going to work this whole offseason on dispossessing the puck from my opponent so I can get more shots. I'm like, wow, that's like really smart. And he did it. And he's been incredible over the last 2 seasons, taking the puck away from other people and scoring. But I thought to myself, this is a young person who understood what success looked like for him. It's scoring goals. And he understood the key drivers of success to get there. I can't score unless I have the puck. Okay, how do I get the puck? Okay, Now that I know how to get the puck, what drills do I need to work on to get better at that? So I'm giving you this analogy just to say, like, once we figure out what success looks like, we can start to map out the key drivers of success. How are we going to get to this thing that we said that we need? The next thing I think is really implementing both short and long-term actions. Some of these things need 10 years to be changed. And it's frustrating and it's hard, but some of these things we can start today. So I'll give you an example of TFC. In soccer culture, we talk about buying and selling players. And I'm sitting in a meeting and some colleagues are like, Tyler's a really good player. We're going to sell Tyler for $1 million. And Sel's a great player. We're going to sell Sel for 1.5 million. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to stop you right there. Hold on a second. We want to be the most inclusive soccer organization in the world. It starts with us and it starts with our language. So I recognize that this is not a Toronto FC thing. This is global football. Everybody speaks like this, but you got to understand that as long as I'm sitting on this call, you're not going to talk about selling black people. Now, Tyler's a really good player, and the value of Tyler's contract is $1 million. But Tyler's not for sale. He's a free unit. It starts with us. So there are some long-term goals that we can set for ourselves, but there are some low-hanging fruit, like our language, like tapping into our unconscious bias, to cultural relevancy and better cultural competency understanding of why this Indigenous kid has super long hair and how you use that as a teachable moment for someone who maybe doesn't understand that. Like, these are the moments I think that are short-term. And then the last thing I'd say is we have to evolve. Because think about the system that you all work in. It's like the sports system that I work in. Somebody made it way back then and they never changed it. They never changed it. If I make my kids the same egg sandwich every day, they will not eat. I've got to evolve as a chef for toddlers. They require it. And I think evolution is a really important factor, right? We can say today that this is success, that might change it. So we have to be open and prepared and fluid in changing what success looks like. To Amani's point, like, success today might just be getting through the entire 30 minutes at the park without a conflict. That could be success. So you know what? Before homeboy starts going off and karate kicking people, we're gonna just go for 15 minutes. We're gonna pop in. We're gonna be okay, and we're gonna cut. And we're gonna come back tomorrow. We're gonna do it slowly build up how to play this game. And those are some short-term, I think, things we can do. And then we have to evolve what success looks like. So hopefully that answered your question, Martin. Have I ever spoken to students? I've spoken to lots of students. Thank you for that. At a younger age. Thank you so much for saying that. I try to spend as much time as I can with young people. I do have a bias. Ageism is a thing. I care about the future. I care about young people. I probably skew all of my time and energy in that direction. I try to speak to young people as much as I can. I'm also like very gray and they don't really want to hear from me. So it's contextual, but I do talk to a lot of young student athletes more than anything. I appreciate the call out about people that look like me, because there's not a lot of people who look like me that have a title like mine. And there's a lot of young people that see that.
Yeah. Did you any post Mr. or no?
I do.
I don't know. Did you post the
Sarah, I hope you're not doing no banking because we can hear you.
This is what I think happens. When I give them the link, they scroll.
I don't think yours is right.
Sarah.
When I do mine, it works.
Sarah.
Then this one.
I got her, don't worry.
Sarah, we didn't get your banking information. Don't worry, it's okay. I lost my train of thought. What was it? I lost it. See the gray hairs?
Talking about kids.
Young kids in school and, investing in them. And
Yeah, so whatever. It's probably something good. You lost it. But yeah, for me, the challenging thing is like, it's like the representation. Sorry, that's what it was. The representation is so important, right? So like Masai Ujiri, who's the president of Toronto Raptors, is the only Black president. And George Floyd gets murdered. He writes an op-ed in the Globe and Mail, and it spirals my company into action. And I'll be real with you. If Masai's not here, I don't know what we do. I'm not sure if we know where to start. So I do appreciate you saying that, and like I do really take it seriously. I don't take for granted how I look, where I come from, and what that could mean to a young person who could potentially do way better than I'm even doing. So thank you for saying that. Aaron, I'll go to you.
Hey, thanks again. I wanted to ask, because even me asking this is kind of like ironic. I was just curious that what would you recommend resources to be for like white people, straight people kind of thing, just to resources to look into? Because I know it can be tiring as like a minority to have to constantly explain like the systematic oppressions that are happening all the time. And it's kind of not the job of every single Black person or Indigenous person to have to explain the history and the trauma that they've experienced, and why like microaggressions are a thing, and why you asking to touch like a Black woman's hair is inappropriate kind of thing. Like what resources would you recommend for those who aren't fully educated yet on the mechanisms of everything, versus having to go and exhaust people of color and other minorities to have to explain these types of things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for asking that. It's such a hard question to answer. There's a million books, it's videos, it's TED Talks. It's like, I think you figure out what your learning style is, and it's so much access to information out there. I think the piece that's missing though is practical application. And that was my problem with university. It was like, here's all this theory. Theoretically, this sounds great, but how do I put this into practice? So for me, as a coach, action planning is really important. It's, again, what do I not know? How or who from can I learn this? And then how do I apply this into my daily life? You know, as much as I agree with you, it's a lot of white people who've called me over the last year. And I'm like, I'm not talking to you about this. Like, we'll read a book or YouTube it. And there's a lot that I have talked to. And those personal relationships for me, it's like my responsibility for my friends to have that. Because the same way that I would speak to someone from a different identity and ask them to learn about their situation is what I'm doing. So I do agree with you that putting the onus on a racialized person is wrong, but I do think that if you're tapping into that network, having honest cultural conversations is really important, and it's an exchange. It's not like, hey, tell me all the things that happened to you that were really bad. It's like there could be really nuanced things that you want to learn from somebody, So I don't think that that's bad, and I don't think, in my opinion, I'm just one person. I don't think that you should be afraid to ask a Black person a question. Like, that's not where we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to a place where you're asking the right question and you're coming with the right energy, and you're not here just trying to extract my knowledge for no purpose, right? So, I think expanding your network and having the courage to do that comes with some trust on both sides.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I just have so many of my friends who are like exhausted because you'll have everyone come up and be like, so can you explain to me exactly what like a microaggression is or something? And they're like, again, because they just did it. Like,
microaggression. That was
yeah.
one. No, but
Exactly.
but I mean, like, that's fair, right? It's a fair call out. But if your friend's battery's empty, what can you do? How can you recharge it?
I just say Google.
Yeah, no, but listen, if your friend's battery's empty, you recharge your friend's battery.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And like, understand that the battery pack of a Black woman right now is going to be pretty close to dead.
Yeah.
So what's your responsibility as a white woman to help refill that? And that's, again, back to this anti-racism, right? How can I uplift? What can I do to bring value? You're giving me something, your knowledge, your experience. Cool. What can I offer you in return? Like, this is how society started. We used to be like this. And now it's so, transactional and extractive that we've forgotten how to be reciprocal, right? And I can offer, you can tell me something, but I can give you something back too,
Yeah, exactly.
Bina, thanks for the link in the chat.
I got one more question, Justin. More of a personal one. Where do you see yourself in, 10, 15 years when your kids are getting a bit older, they're in their teenage years? Do you see yourself continuing with MLSE, or have you kind of mapped that out for you, or is it just whatever,
That's such a good question. I have no idea. I'll tell you that my son turning 5, it's been such an emotional week for me. Like, last week was such an emotional week. It was weird. I got my first dose of the vaccine on Thursday, and it really hit me sitting there. Like, this whole global crisis for this one stupid needle. This is so crazy. Like, the whole thing just hit me. My privilege, my ability to like book an appointment and pop into a rec center and get the thing and get out. Like, the biggest inconvenience is showing my health card 3 times. And like, I felt really privileged and lucky and fortunate. And then I'm speaking with a fire captain who's there, and I'm like, is this your shift or are you volunteering? He goes, no, I just finished my 12. and I'm volunteering. And I'm like, thank you for doing this. Like, that's incredible that it's people like you who are, you know, giving up all this time. And it's some of my homies that are like going out and going to parties and like whatever, you know. So like it really hit me in a deep way. And then, you know, like I was bothering my son's in virtual kindergarten, and I do his mystery reader once a month and come on and read to the kids or whatever. And I'm like, this is your last mystery reader as 4. Like, you're never going to be 4. You're going to be 5. And he goes, I know, Daddy, I want to be 5. I'm like, no, I don't want you to be 5. I just want you to be 4. And it's like, for the first time, it's really hitting me that my kids are getting old and it's happening so quick. The other indicators are the gray hair and my hip flexor is really tight, but it's like everything's just going so fast. And I just wanted to slow down for a second. And then I'm leaving the rec center getting my meal, and there's 2 teen boppers who rode their bicycles over to make out behind the rec center. I was like, see, like, Tyler, I'm not ready for teenage kids. All of you who have, you know, kids and foster kids that are teenage age, please DM me all of the advice. I need all of the information. I am not ready. Little people, little problems. So I'm not going to answer your question about where I see my kids in 10 years because I'm not ready for it. But for me, I'm really enjoying sport, and I don't so much think about what's going to happen for me, to be real. If you ask me what I want to see in 10 years, is I want to see people who look like me having better access to opportunity. I want to see young people recognize and reach their full potential. As a basketball coach, I've complained so much about young adults. I coach college women, so they're like 18 to 24. And I complain all the time, like, you're so entitled, you have no patience, you just expect everything to happen overnight, you need to take your turn, you need to pay your dues. And I'm like, hold on a second. It's a lot of young people in the world who have never heard of David Suzuki, and they think that Greta is the first environmental activist of all time. And I'm like, I kind of don't mind that, because they're looking at us and they're saying, you old people suck, you have done nothing, we're going to move the needle. And when I look at all of the social justice movements, when I look at the environmental movements, when I think about the TTC announcing that by 2035 they're going to be carbon neutral, when I hear that the state of California won't produce any more, you know, gas and oil engine cars by 2035, like, the kids are making it happen. You know, the kids are taking over Reddit streams and investing. Like, they're moving. They're not waiting on us. So in 10 years, I'm really looking forward to seeing all the progress that they're going to make, and they're going to push us forward, and they're going to force us to take action. So I actually don't know, man, and I really don't think about it, to be honest, about where I'm going to be.
Cool. Any other?
You're right, Nina. The system was built this way. I wasn't trying to scare everybody today, but you know.
Any other questions, guys, that we have before we say goodbye to Justin, or comments?
Can I just make a comment?
Of course.
Hey, Justin, it's Marlene. The thought that keeps coming to me, in addition to all the wealth of knowledge yourself and the organization provide, is we also need to start with us. And I don't think we have time to go through that, but maybe offline, I would like to hear how your approach, or the organization you're with, the approach where we start with us. For example, there are some individuals that the way they look at life, they don't even see color, but in the long run, it will affect them because of how they live, the way they dress, their behavior, not, playing their role. For example, dropping out of school, maybe having children after children, not taking care of them. Some parents work really hard and they're not able to do the 24/7 supervision to help raise the children. So just on that note, it would be interesting to just hear how you would also address that, because sometime we have to also play, be on the front line for our future.
Will you be, Tyler, we're okay for time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Arlene, for sharing that. It's hard because I don't know everybody else, but what I heard from you is that it's exhausting having to call people out, and I agree with you. It doesn't partly start with us, Marlene, it completely starts with us. You're absolutely right. People who don't see color are privileged to not see color. If you have the right to say that, it's because you live with privilege. that you don't have to think about the way your skin looks before you do something. So we can all go on the website right now. We can go on Expedia.com and we can start planning our next vacation for post-pandemic, because I know we all could use it. And maybe you don't have to think about if Black people are allowed to travel to this part of this country. Maybe you don't have to think about the history of indigeneity in that part of the world. Maybe you don't have to think about if they accept, gay, lesbian, queer people in this part of this city. And you could just book your vacation. You just go wherever you want. But that's all privilege, right? I hear stories all the time like, well, I'm the general manager of this hockey club and I volunteered my time and I was a stick boy and I was an intern for free and then I worked my way up and now I'm the general. I said, well, that's cool, bro. It's really great that you were able to work for free and someone paid your bills. I'm really happy for you. Everybody can't do that. So that's all privilege. And I think, Marlene, I live with so much privilege too, like we all do. So it's not calling out anyone to say, you have privilege and I don't. I think my personal opinion is that we all walk through the world in moments where we're super empowered and moments where we feel like super marginalized. And some of us, this scale just tips one way or the other. We all have moments like this, but for some of us, we just have way more up here, and for some of us, we have way more down here. So like if we're gonna go to a meeting and we're gonna be talking about, key qualities and success factors for being a foster parent, I would be like the lowest in the room in understanding how to do that. But if any of you guys want to go to a reggae party this weekend, please believe that's my turn to take over. It's like we have to really recognize there's moments where we can lead and there's moments where we have to fall back and understand how that kind of interplays. But people who say they don't see color, to me, like, it's privilege. And I was speaking with an Indigenous elder and he this is what he said to me. He said, Marlene, people who are not following this work, don't blame them, they're just not ready. And a man who literally lived through residential schools, who could say that to me, reminded me of my privilege and saying like, I can't get this frustrated. I gotta take my time. I gotta accept that not everybody's ready for this, but the people who are ready, I'm gonna roll with them. Those are the people I'm gonna move with. And the other people, if the system starts to change, those people are gonna look really bad and that's gonna be their problem. The bus is here. Anyone who wants to roll, let's go. Jump in. And if you choose not to, that's okay too. But society is holding a different expectation for these conversations right now, whether you like it or not. And Marlene, you're absolutely right that it has to be us that does it. And the reason I say it has to be you is because it's your responsibility. All of you on this call. Because none of us work for Estee Lauder. If I worked in makeup and I didn't want to make shades that were reflective of different people's skin color, that would be my choice. But that's not the job you signed up for. Because it was mentioned in the chat and we all know it. There's no point in harping on the disproportionate number of Black, Indigenous, and racialized youth that are in care. So we know what we signed up for in this work. And it is our responsibility as leaders and as caring adults, as parents, to set this ship starting with us. We have to, we must. So thank you, Marnie, for sharing that. For the other part of your comment that you didn't really say, but that I heard, is that burnout's tough. Emotional burnout is tough. So I encourage you all, as Black people on this call, to connect together offline. And you don't have to feel any type of way about doing that. We have a Black meeting at MLSE now. We have a Black meeting. We have a Black inclusion group, a Black employee inclusion group, and it's open to allies, it's open to anybody. It's about how we're going to better support the Black community through our company. And then we have a Black meeting. Because white people, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. After the meeting is the Black meeting, where all the Black people come together and talk about what really happened that y'all can talk about. Sorry, I let the secret out. It's okay for us to hold our own space. It's okay for more than 3 of us to be at the microwave at the same time. And we have to start to reclaim that in our workplaces as well. We have to start to do that. So you should take the confidence, just start your own group, come together, hold space to talk, to reason, to vent, to talk about the things that are happening with people who understand it. Because to Aaron's point, you have caring people like Aaron who want to be supportive, but just don't understand. And it's exhausting to try to explain it to you. And I really just don't want to right now. Right now, I just want to talk about it. And I would encourage you as an organization to find those spaces. Thank you, Amani. Any other questions or comments? There were no emotional outbursts. I was waiting for one of those.
I just want to say, Justin, if you don't know what's going to happen down the road for you, I think you would make a great foster dad. So you can maybe talk to your wife before you know it, have some kids in your home or some more kids. So
Thank you, Tyler.
but all kidding aside, thank you for coming and sharing not only what you do, but why you do it and your story. And we all very much appreciate it, especially during the lockdown and all that. So I think I can say for everyone, thank you very much. And I can share your email if that's okay.
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, I will send that out to everyone, and feel free to contact Justin for questions, comments, whatnot. But again, it was wonderful listening to you speak, and hopefully we can have you back soon.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, everybody. Have a blessed day.
Thank you,
Bye.
Justin.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, I'm going to end this. Unless people do want to stay on, chat afterwards, you can do that. No obligation, but I'm going to be hanging out here with my thoughts. So if you want to join me, that's wonderful.
Hey, I became a grandma.
Oh, congratulations.
See, look at, there he is.
Oh,
Do they have a name yet?
I'm
Or are
waiting
they-
to hear it just happened.
That's so exciting.